welcome to Daily News Simplified, the answer to what, why and how of newspaper reading. Today I am going to discuss Delhi edition dated 19th March 2018 of The Hindu. So let's begin. This important article appears on page 14 and it reads a measure of manufacturing. Now this article talks about the measurement of level of manufacturing in the country, and the two most commonly used indexes to measure the level of manufacturing in India are Index of Industrial Production, which is also commonly called as IIP, and the second index is the Purchasing Managers Index, which is also commonly called as PMI. So a question pertaining to IIP has also been asked in the past in the prelims exam, which said in India, in the overall index of industrial production, the indices of 8 core industries have a combined weight of 37.9%. Which of the following are among these 8 core industries? So let us first understand the concept of IIP and PMI, and then we will come back to this question. We will start with IIP. IIP is an index that measures the quantum of changes in the industrial production, and it captures the general level of industrial activity in the country. So basically, IIP is a composite index which measures short-term changes in the volume of production of industrial products. And this index measures this volume of industrial production for a given period of time with reference to a base period. So these are some of the key points about IIP. Now let us discuss the meaning of PMI. So PMI, or Purchasing Managers Index, is also an indicator of the production in manufacturing sector. So this is an indicator of the economic health and investor sentiments about the manufacturing sector. And the base or reference for PMI is 50. So if a reading of PMI is above 50, say it is 52 or 53 or whatever, then this indicates economic expansion. And if the reading is below 50, then it indicates economic contraction. So till now we have understood about the key features of IIP and PMI. Now let's discuss how IIP and PMI are calculated. Firstly, IIP is calculated by the Central Statistical Organization, which comes under Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation, also known as MOSPI. Also, the base value for IIP is 100 and the base year or the reference year for calculation of IIP is 2011-12. So suppose the value of IIP comes out to be 116, then it means that there has been a 16% growth in the industry compared to the base year. So look here, any increase or decrease in the value of IIP is compared to this base year, which is 2011-12. However, this is not the case in PMI. In PMI, there is no reference year or base year. Also, in IIP, there are different types of classification of industries. Firstly, there is a sector-wise classification, and this sector-wise classification includes mining, manufacturing and electricity. Similarly, there is also a use-based classification in case of IIP, and this use-based classification consists of 6 categories such as primary goods, intermediate goods, capital goods, consumer durables, consumer non-durables and so on. Also, since IIP measures the amount of industrial production in the country, it also consists of a group of 8 core industries. And these 8 core industries include coal, crude oil, natural gas, refinery products, fertilizers, steel, cement and electricity. And as per the latest IIP, these 8 core industries have a combined weight of 40.3% in the IIP. So with this we have understood about the classification of industries in IIP and how is IIP calculated. Now let's come to how PMI is calculated. So PMI, or in case of India, it is commonly called as the Nikkei India PMI, and here the name Nikkei stands for the Japanese firm Nikkei, which publishes the PMI data for India. So the Nikkei India PMI is based on monthly data from managers in more than 400 manufacturing companies. Also, PMI divides the manufacturing sector into 8 broad categories, and these categories are basic metals, chemicals and plastics, timber and paper, electrical and optical, food and drinks, mechanical engineering and transport. Also, various different variables are used for the calculation of PMI in India, and these variables usually include items like new orders, employment, input costs, output prices, etc. And if we look at these variables, they are very dynamic. So if we compare IIP and PMI, then in that case we can say that PMI is more dynamic compared to IIP. So till now we have discussed about the key features and how IIP and PMI are calculated in India. Now let's discuss key differences and similarities between IIP and PMI. Firstly, as we have mentioned above also, PMI is a private sector survey, whereas IIP is calculated by the government. Secondly, while IIP is a measure of output, PMI measures activity at the purchasing or at the input stage. Apart from these key differences between IIP and PMI, there are also certain similarities between the two indexes. Firstly, both IIP and PMI take into account only the formal sector, that is, both of the indexes do not measure economic activity in the informal sector. And secondly, both PMI and IIP are based on survey method, and hence they only represent a sample of the entire manufacturing sector. That is, there might be a possibility that both these indexes might be missing out some of the industries that are a part of formal sector, as they only take a sample of the entire manufacturing sector. So with the help of this discussion, we have talked about all key points pertaining to IIP and PMI. Now coming back to this question, this talked about the 8 core industries, and it says which of the following are among these 8 core industries, and options are cement, fertilizers, natural gas, refinery products and textiles. And we know that these 4 are a part of 8 core industries, but textiles is not a part of 8 core industries. Hence, the correct answer here is option C. So similar to IIP, questions can also be asked about PMI in the prelims exam. With this, we will move on to the next article. Next, we will discuss this data point that appears on page 9, and it reads, Worrying Trends on Jobs in India. Now, this data point basically discusses the findings of the World Employment Social Outlook Trends 2018 report, and this report is prepared by the International Labour Organization, and this report has said that in the years to come, the number of workers in vulnerable forms of employment is going to increase in India. Now, employment forms a part of GS paper 3, and many questions on this has been asked in the past in the UPSC exam. For example, in 2014, a question was asked, while we flaunt India's demographic dividend, we ignore the dropping rates of employability. What are we missing while doing so? Where will the jobs that India desperately needs come from? Explain. In this respect, we should understand the concept of vulnerable employment as well, and how will it have an impact on the labor market in India. First of all, we should know what is the main focus of this World Employment Social Outlook Trends report, which is prepared by ILO. So this report basically examines the current state of the global labor market, and it assesses the most recent developments in the labor market, and thus it makes global and regional projections of unemployment and vulnerable employment. And in the 2018 report, it has been said that the vulnerable forms of employment is likely to increase in India in the coming years. Also, this report discusses various other factors as well, such as key job quality indicators, sectoral employment and unemployment, impact of aging on the labor market of a country, and so on. So now we know what are the main things that are discussed in this World Employment Social Outlook report. Now let's understand the meaning of this term vulnerable employment. So as you can see from this graphic here, this green line indicates India's share of vulnerable workers, and it is showing a slightly upward trend. It means that the share of vulnerable workers will increase in India. So this vulnerable employment or vulnerable workers basically includes the self-employed workers or the own account workers. And these workers are typically engaged in the informal sectors of employment, and usually these workers also lack social security, and it is expected that the share of these vulnerable workers is likely to increase in India, which is not good for the labor market of the country. This is because these workers are usually characterized by inadequate earnings, low productivity, and difficult employment conditions. And hence, an increase in the share of such workers is not a good condition for the labor market of India, as it is not going to add to productive employment in the country. And as we have already heard many times, that the economic growth in India is characterized as jobless growth. So if the share of this vulnerable workers increases, then again this will not be good for the economic growth for the country. So I hope till now you have understood some key points about the World Employment and Social Outlook report and about vulnerable employment. There are many other findings of this report as well with respect to India. For example, it is said that even though many jobs have been created in the services sector in India, still those jobs have been created in the traditional low value added services, which do not actively contribute to productive employment. And mainly these jobs are a part of informal sector and not the formal sector. Also, the report says that in the manufacturing sector, the share of informal employment has increased. And this is mainly due to the large labor market rigidities that are present in the Indian labor market. So from this article, direct questions can be asked in the prelims exam about who prepares the World Employment and Social Outlook report, what is the meaning of vulnerable employment, is vulnerable employment increasing in India or decreasing in India, and so on. And similarly, in the mains exam, related questions pertaining to employment and what are the problems facing employment sector in India can be asked. With this, we will move on to the next article. The next article that we will discuss appears on page 10 and it reads, Act on Foreign Funds to Parties amended. Now this news says that the Lok Sabha through an amendment to the Finance Bill 2018 has passed a bill which will exempt the political parties from the scrutiny of their funds which they have received from abroad since 1976. And to facilitate this change, an amendment has been proposed under the Foreign Contribution Regulation Act or FCRA Act 2010. And this amendment will be done with a retrospective effect. So before this amendment was passed, all the foreign funds that were received by a political party were subject to scrutiny. But now after this amendment, the funds that a political party receives from foreign sources will not come under any scrutiny. That is, they will be exempted from scrutiny for funds that have been received from foreign companies. In this respect, we should also understand the meaning of a foreign company. So the Companies Act 2013 defines a foreign company as a company or a corporate body which is incorporated outside of India but which has a place of business in India, whether by itself or through an agent, physically or through electronic mode. So any funds received from these companies to political parties with retrospective effect from 1976 will now be free from any kind of scrutiny. So after understanding what is there in this news and what is the meaning of a foreign company, we should also know that which particular acts actually allow foreign companies to provide funds to the political parties. These acts are first the Foreign Contribution Regulation Act or the FCRA Act 2010, which allows foreign companies with their subsidiaries in India to fund political parties in India. And the second concerned act is Representation of People Act 1951. This act mainly aims at regulating the election process in India. So it was basically these two acts which allowed for foreign companies to provide funding to political parties. And now with the new amendment, this funding will be free from any kind of scrutiny. Now we should also know what will be the impact of this decision. So basically this exemption will provide a blanket ban on all the previous illegal foreign contributions that were made to political parties in violation of the law. And thus it will have a negative impact on the transparency in political funding. So with the help of this article, we have understood about what amendment has been made regarding the scrutiny of contributions made by foreign companies to Indian political parties, which particular acts provide for the contribution by foreign companies, and what amendment will be made now to exempt these contributions from foreign companies, and finally what will be the impact of the exemption from this scrutiny. With this, we will move on to the next article. The next article that we will discuss appears on page 8 and it reads, In a Plastics World. So this article talks about the presence of microplastic particles in water, Recent findings have shown the presence of microplastic particles in drinking water as well. So basically this article talks about the harmful effects of the presence of microplastics in drinking water, how this menace has increased and what has been its consequence, and what steps have been taken at the global level to address this problem, and what steps have been taken in India to address this problem, and what should be the future way forward. This article forms a part of environment section in UPSC exam. So first we should know the meaning of microplastic particles. Microplastics are particles having a size less than 5 millimeters that enter the environment as either primary industrial products such as in scrubbers and in cosmetics, or via urban waste of consumers. So these microplastics have been recently found to be present in drinking water as well, and they contain very harmful elements such as polypropylene, polyethylene terephthalate and so on, and these enter the drinking water, food and even inhaled air, and thus they have negative impacts on human health. The generation of plastics also has a negative impact on the environment. One of such consequences is the creation of the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. This Great Pacific Garbage Patch is also sometimes referred to as the Pacific Trash Vortex. So this trash vortex is actually a collection of marine debris in the North Pacific Ocean. This marine debris basically is the litter that ends up in oceans, seas and other large bodies of water, and thus it results in creation of this trash vortex. And most of this marine debris consists of non-biodegradable waste such as plastics. From the exam point of view, we should also know the geographic location of this Great Pacific Garbage Patch. The marine debris in this garbage patch spans waters from west coast of North America to Japan. And this entire patch is actually comprised of the Western Garbage Patch, which is located near Japan, and the Eastern Garbage Patch, which is located between Hawaii and California. So I hope till now you have understood some key points about microplastics. What are the main elements of those microplastics that have a negative impact on human health and environment? And you must have understood about the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. So in order to address these issues at the global level, the World Health Organization has come forward to commission a review of the health impact of plastics in water. Secondly, last year in Nairobi, UN member countries decided to produce a binding agreement to deal with the release of plastics in the marine environment. So these are some of the steps that have been adopted at the global level to address the issue of microplastics. Now coming to India, what steps have been taken and should be taken to address the problem of microplastics? So in India as well, plastics are one of the biggest pollutants of dumping sites, rivers and wetlands. Hence, in order to control the harmful impact of plastics, it has been suggested to control the production and distribution of plastics and to ban single-use plastic bags. Secondly, the Government of India has notified solid waste management rules in 2016. And these rules call for segregation of wastes before dumping. Some of the important features of the Solid Waste Management Rules 2016 are that these rules should be applicable beyond municipal areas and they should be extended to urban agglomerations, census towns, industrial townships, airports, SEZs, etc. Secondly, the rules have asked to introduce segregation of waste into 3 streams. And these streams are wet waste, dry waste and domestic hazardous wastes. And also these segregated wastes should be handed over to authorized rag pickers and waste collectors of the local bodies. These rules have also said that new townships and group housing societies should be made responsible for in-house waste handling and processing arrangements for biodegradable waste. And lastly, under the solid waste management rules, the government also intends to set up waste processing facilities at local levels having a population greater than 10 lakh. So this basically shows all the important steps that have been adopted in India to control the problem of plastic waste. Also, apart from these measures, some other measures can also be adopted in order to control microplastics. For example, waste management can be achieved through community participation. This will be very fruitful as it will also help in generation of employment opportunities. And also, there should be a stress on changing the nature of plastic from cheap and disposable plastic to durable, reusable and recyclable plastic. So with the help of this article, we have understood about microplastic particles, about the impact of plastics on the environment, including the creation of trash vortexes, and what steps have been adopted at the global level as well as in India in order to address the problem of plastics. With this, we will move on to the next article. The last article that we will discuss today appears on page 9 and it reads, "The War That Never Ends." Now, this article talks about the US struggle in Afghanistan, and questions pertaining to Afghanistan have been asked in the past as well. For example, in 2005, a question was asked, "Examine the developments in Afghanistan in the post-Taliban period." And similarly, in 2013, a question was asked, "The proposed withdrawal of International Security Assistance Force from Afghanistan in 2014 is fraught with major security implications for the countries of the region. Examine in light of the fact that India is faced with a plethora of challenges and needs to safeguard its own strategic interests." So after reading these questions, the topic pertaining to Afghanistan and United States becomes important, and hence we will discuss this article. So in 2001, the goal of United States in Afghanistan was to eliminate Al-Qaeda and Taliban and form a friendly democratic government in Afghanistan. However, even after 2014, the goal of United States is still to support a stable government of Afghanistan and to ensure ideological elimination of Al-Qaeda and Taliban. So even after the passage of such a long time period, US is still unable to achieve its goal in Afghanistan, which shows that US is still struggling in Afghanistan. And with the help of this article, we will understand why is US still struggling in Afghanistan. Firstly, Pakistan, which has been a US ally in Afghanistan, is playing a double game. And how is Pakistan doing so? Pakistan, through ISI, continues to support both Al-Qaeda and Taliban. And through this, Pakistan is able to maintain its strategic depth in Afghanistan. So this is one of the reasons why US is still struggling in Afghanistan. The second reason why US is still struggling in Afghanistan is its policy of using drone attacks. It is because of the use of these drone attacks that has killed some parts of the population in Afghanistan, and thereby it has led to alienating the locals from United States. And it is because of these drone attacks that Al-Qaeda and Taliban are using them against the United States, and thus they are trying to raise sympathy from the local population. So these are the main two reasons why US is still struggling in Afghanistan and why it has not been able to achieve its aim of maintaining a friendly democratic government in Afghanistan. This article forms a part of international relations and the students should read it from the mains exam point of view. With this, we come to an end to today's newspaper discussion. Now let's move on to question for the day.